Hite's 8 Country. Ahoy, mates, and welcome aboard. On this voyage, we're going to be having quite an adventure. We'll be visiting the first lighthouse to ever be erected along this section of coastline. Also, the last lighthouse, perhaps the last to ever be built in this entire country. We'll also be making a few side trips that I hope you'll find equally interesting. But we begin by casting off for Egmont Key. Being an island, the only access to Egmont Key is by boat. Yours, a friend's, or one of the several companies that offer ferry service to the island. If you like boating, weather permitting, you'll love the ride. Over and above the sheer pleasure of being out on the waters of our beautiful bay is the exciting anticipation of your destination. Lying at the mouth of Tampa Bay, Egmont Key is much more than a beautiful island teeming with wildlife. It is literally covered with history. It was first explored by the Spanish over 250 years ago, but it was the English who came along a short time later and named the island after the Earl of Egmont, who at the time was Lord of the British Admiralty. Egmont has served many purposes over the years: prison, fortress, the massive remains of which we'll soon explore. The most prominent feature is its lighthouse, and today the island serves as a nature preserve and I think Florida's most unique state park. You'll be amazed at what you find as you wander about. For instance, brick roads seemingly to nowhere. But at the outset of the Spanish-American War, this peaceful place became a bustling military base. 5 enormous gun batteries were built facing the Gulf to repel any invasion of the bay. Behind them, the support facilities and community for all the personnel, and it was rather sophisticated for its time. It had electricity, telephone service, even a railroad. Extensive housing for servicemen and their families lined these brick roads, and there was a school and hospital to serve their needs. While I've been to Egmont many times over the years, for this trip I had the ultimate guide. Jim Spangler, president of the Egmont Key Alliance, a nonprofit group dedicated to preserving this remarkable place. Jim discovered Egmont 10 years ago.
And we were on the east shore of the island, and a park ranger came by, and he began to pass out information. And at that point in time, I didn't know anything about Egmont other than that the water around the island was great. Yeah. I got introduced to the red brick road that we're standing on right now, and the lighthouse, and the other structures that were on the island, and Egmont Key grabbed me, and it has never let me go.
While it's a great privilege to have Jim for a guide, the Alliance volunteers have posted signs, many with old photos of the original installations, at locations across the island. Here, for instance, still stand 2 massive concrete columns. They were used to provide rock-solid stability to ensure accuracy for the spotting towers used to sight the guns on enemy targets. At each location, you can read all about the history of the ruins that lie before you.
Fort Dade had over 100 buildings. Because most of them were built of wood, fire was a real danger. A water system with hydrants was installed in 1902. By 1907...
Like the firehouse, much of Egmont Key itself is gone, eroded away by the waves, and with it, much of its history has gone into the Gulf. Bob and Nancy Snyder brought their friends the Webbs to see Egmont for their first time, for fear it might someday be gone entirely.
That's why I wanted to bring them out here and show them, because when we used to come out here, so much of it is gone.
People don't know the historic value of this place unless they come out here. They're just not aware of it. And that's what we, like these signs here. We love walking around reading the signs to see what used to be here. And like he said, when we first came out, those forts were standing, and now they're basically in the water.
Nancy is referring to the enormous southern battery, which now lies several hundred yards offshore. It was once well inland. Dramatic evidence of the island's erosion. And there are many other examples as well. For instance, the old sewer system. Believe it or not, this is a manhole cover. As the erosion continues, these start to rise to the surface. Or should I say, the island starts to drop below them. They're all over this island, and they extend way out into the Gulf, where the island used to be. There are many other examples, perhaps none better than this building. It once was the island's electrical generating and ice plants, and it once stood in the middle of the island. But the erosion didn't do all this damage.
It was in such disrepair that officials were afraid people might get hurt climbing around inside. The Tampa bomb squad came out hoping to level the building with their skills and explosives. Well, as you can see, it's not exactly level. They built these things mighty tough on this fortress island.
About the same time, the surf was beginning its attack on the northern batteries, and one was beginning to give up the fight. Volunteers tried desperate measures, even attempting to support the massive structures by shoving fallen palm trees under the foundations. But just as this history was about to be stolen by the sea, came the cavalry, the Army Corps of Engineers. Dredging to maintain the depth of the main ship channel provided the Corps with 1 million cubic yards of sand with which to defend the batteries. Where once swimmers frolicked in front of the fort, they may now sunbathe on a massive beach. And one of Egmont Key's most important remnants of its military history is protected, at least for the time being.
This is McIntosh. We consider it the crown jewel of all of our gun batteries. First one built on the island had 2 8-inch disappearing guns that would actually be at a low elevation. Here is the concrete wall. They would raise up, fire, the recoil would kick them back down where they would be reloaded. And obviously the reason they did it is because an enemy ship offshore, they did not want them to see where the gun battery was.
But now Floridians and folks from around the world can come and marvel at this place, and children can play on and explore a real fort. Rachel Craig thinks it's Seems Rachel and her brother Luke have a lot of influence over their mom, Mavis.
Oh, the children requested to come here today. We were thinking of going to some other places that were closer, but he really wanted to see the ruins. It's really special to just come out here and paradise. They call it paradise.
And it is a paradise, the perfect place for relaxation, recreation, and education. And our education will continue with the Lighthouse and the mystery of Egmont Key.
I think the most unusual installation on this island is up at the north end. It's not open to the public. It's simply too dark and dangerous to let anybody inside. However, Jim has allowed us a look through the lens. Let's check it out.
It's called the Bunker House. From the outside, it looks every bit a bunker, and it certainly is. But when you enter the bunker and walk down the long concrete hallway to the interior, you discover it is a bunker that was built over a house, a mighty stout house at that. And that's the mystery. Certainly the house was built first. The bunker must have been built over it afterward. But why? One theory is for the protection of the commanding officer and his family, but far more likely is the possibility that this was the command and communication center, and it was decided more protection for such a critical facility was necessary. For some reason here, more than any other place on the island, my thoughts went back to what really went on back then. To the people, the troops that once manned this place. If indeed the command center, for years this strange structure inside a bunker bustled with activity. A constant flow of information coming in and orders going out. During the Spanish-American War, vigilance was constant, and any sail or smokestack that broke the horizon would have heightened the level of alert and tension among the men. Concern for what the sighting offshore might be and their families who might be on the island at the time. After all, Tampa Bay, the port from which Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders had embarked for Cuba, would have been a prime target. Over the years, the bunker house has become a storage facility for some of the artifacts found around the island. A jail door from the old guardhouse, ancient parts from the Lighthouse, a footlocker containing instruments that may have belonged to a member of the Army Corps of Engineers of the day, and some Civil War era tombstones. By the way, all remains of military personnel found over the years have been reinterred in the National Cemetery at St. Augustine, Florida.
Well, you can see where this brick road ends, but it really only appears to end. When I first walked across this island 30 years ago, I had no idea there were any roads here. You can see how much work the volunteers have had to do to clear off these roads.
And the Alliance has been busy all over the island, not just trying to save it from the surf and reveal its past as in the roads, but restoring some of its history as well. This is the old guardhouse where that jail door in the bunker house once hung. Here's how it looked when I shot it from the air several years ago. Today, despite their limited resources, the Alliance has come a long way toward its restoration, right down to, or should I say up to, the roof. The company that had made the original tiles for the roof was still in business and making the same tile as it had over 100 years ago. Just from this one building, the guardhouse, Egmont visitors can better imagine how the whole island community must have looked back in its heyday. One of my greatest pleasures over the years has been introducing friends and relatives to the island. There are a myriad of historical places across our great land, but Egmont Key is unique. You can divide the day between so many different activities, and at the end of the day, go away knowing that you've introduced others to a place and an experience they'll never forget. Folks like Ken and Sharon Licata, who brought their friend Shelby Cohen here for her first visit.
There's a presence in any place like this that kind of inspires you to understand what the people went through so that you can be who you are and where you are. And I think that it's important, especially for people younger than me that are growing up in a not as cultured society, to see things like this and to be able to understand that we had to fight for what we have, and you need to appreciate that.
We mustn't forget the island has some seasonal residents. Much of Egmont is a bird sanctuary, off limits to people. But you invariably will run into one, if not scores, of the island's full-time population.
These are the island's gopher tortoises. There's a population of between 1,800 and 2,000, and they're unique from those on Florida's mainland in that they're protected from the serious respiratory diseases that infect most of the turtle population on the mainland. They are very carefully identified. About 12 or 1,300 of them have actual markings on the back of their shell so that we can determine which ones they are, where they migrate to, how they move around the island. And it's a real treasure to have them here where they're the healthiest population that we are aware of gopher tortoises.
Egmont Key Light, a dependable beacon at the mouth of Tampa Bay for 150 years. All lighthouses hold a special place in the hearts of mariners, but this one especially for Jim. He took me to the top to talk about this lighted landmark.
This is some view from up here, Jim.
Absolutely. You're on the top of the world, our little world of Egmont Key, 87 feet above sea level.
This is, first of all, the first lighthouse on this entire stretch of coastline, isn't it?
That's correct. All the way from St. Mark's down, I believe, to Key West. This was the lighthouse. First one was built in 1848. The hurricane came through that same year, so severely damaged it that it finally was torn down. and this one was erected in 1858. So it's been here 150 years this year. The oldest structure, to our knowledge, in Tampa Bay that's still serving the same purpose that it was built for 150 years ago. Every 15 seconds, that light comes by on your face and mine.
Now, with GPS and global positioning systems, some people, even some people in the Coast Guard, say lighthouses are obsolete, they're anachronisms.
I think there's going to be a need for something like this because people out in the Gulf, one, they may not have GPS. Two, it's a lot more reassuring if you can look in the shoreline and see that light show up every 15 seconds and say, regardless of what this little box tells me, I can see that light. I know where I'm going. You get a little closer, you look between the Don Cesar and the Egmont Key light, you know where you are, you're home.
At the base of the light is a small museum and gift shop. Lack of funding leads to irregular hours, but it holds a lot of interesting history and hopefully can someday be staffed on a regular basis, at least on weekends. Coming up, some history that lies offshore and underwater, and the tale behind the little town that is truly a unique community on the Key. Out there is the main ship channel leading in and out of Tampa Bay, and on the north side of that ship channel is an enormous sandbar. A lot of that sand has been taken away by dredges to re-nourish the beaches along the Pinellas County coast. At one point, those dredges, however, were going to remove more than sand. They were going to cut into and destroy two historic Civil War shipwrecks.
It would have been a huge loss. This is one of the few surviving wrecks from the Civil War era that's still left in Tampa Bay.
Mike Terrell is a marine archaeologist and dive training supervisor at the Florida Aquarium. He and his colleagues have been mapping and recording every detail of the wreck site. One wreck has yet to be uncovered, but the other, the USS Narcissus, is well documented. Her mission had been to blockade Confederate shipping. She met her fate just after the war.
It was heading back to New York, and in January 4th of 1865, a bad storm blew through here, so it tried to anchor up just outside the mouth of the bay. It ran aground on the shoal. Water entered the bottom part of the ship, hit the boiler, and the boiler exploded. Killed everybody on board, and the boat went down right there.
The loss of life is estimated between 30 and 40 Union sailors and soldiers. All the more reason to protect the wreck site, for in a sense, it is also a mass military gravesite. There is yet another aspect of Egmont Key to tell you about. It's that cluster of cottages on the east shore of the island. It is a village for pilots. When we think of pilots, most of us think of planes. Airline pilots, of course, have to be highly skilled, but over the course of their careers, they may not fly more than 2 or 3 different types of planes. Ship pilots, on the other hand, may have to handle over 100 different types of ships during the course of their careers, each of different length, different beam, different drafts, and different handling characteristics. For the Tampa Bay pilots to be able to navigate this diversity of vessels safely up and down the bay every day as they do tells me one thing about this group. They are incredibly talented and versatile captains.
Port 20. Port 20.
Captain John Timmel is one of them. On this occasion, he has one of his larger assignments, guiding a Carnival cruise ship almost 900 feet long out the bay. A pilot's concentration is constant and intense throughout the process, but in between maneuvers, without diverting his attention, he can take some time to talk about his career and the intricacies of the job.
Port 25.
Port 25.
I went to sea. I became a pilot in probably a pretty typical fashion for most of the pilots here. I went to a Merchant Marine Academy. Following that, went to sea for a number of years, increased my license, gained experience. Now I've been a pilot here for almost 20 years. As a matter of fact, I was just noticing in my logbook that if you were with me on my next trip, you'd be aboard for my 5,000th trip. So I guess I'll have to go out for dinner or something. So.
Well, let me take you out, Captain John.
Indeed.
While John calls speed, course, and rudder angles to achieve each course, that doesn't mean the captain of the ship relinquishes command. But pilots know the channel and the influences of wind, tide, and currents.
Heading on 160.
160.
Probably better than the backs of their hands. Such local knowledge is an imperative addition to the captain's resources. Above and after the bridge, the captain's many passengers are simply reveling in the voyage, most not giving a thought, nor should they have to the precision maneuvers being executed by the pilot and crew.
Good ships. Steady on 186.
186.
After the excitement of casting off, the next big event for the passengers is the passage beneath the Skyway Bridge. Almost the entire ship's complement turns out for the occasion. For many, it may be their first time passing under a bridge on a boat, and with only 15 feet of clearance, depending on the tide, it's quite an experience. Those 15 feet or so of clearance are pretty obvious from this angle. Total clearance above mean high water is 193 feet, but the old Skyway Bridge was only 150 feet. Tampa Bay would not have the benefit of the commerce ships such as those of the Carnival fleet, and many larger freighters had the new bridge not been built. But larger ships mean even greater responsibility for the pilots. John says they've adapted handily.
Interesting to realize how large they are. The channel that we were passing through in the downtown, in the harbor area, was just 400 feet wide. The ship is nearly 900 feet. The example everybody likes to use to indicate just how big that is how many football fields. Well, obviously, football is 3 football fields, which is pretty extraordinary. But what I always think is a better example is if you were to take the ship and set it on its stern in downtown Tampa, not only would it be as tall as the tallest building, it'd be more than twice as tall as the tallest building in downtown Tampa. And if you think about moving that and keeping it controlled in tight confines and having to deal with the challenges that nature presents you, it's just very gratifying to do. At the end of the day, at the end of the job, you're very satisfied and feel like you've really done something.
As the ship clears the Skyway, it's the cue to the pilot boat to cast off from Egmont and retrieve the captain. It'll rendezvous right alongside the ship out in the main ship channel and return him to the quay, where he'll retire to his cottage for some badly needed shut-eye as he waits for an inbound vessel to guide back up the bay. When we come back, a little bit about island life from the captain. The pilot village is nestled in the middle of the island on its eastern shore facing the bay. It's here that pilots stay after having guided ships out of the bay, laying over here in their cottages while awaiting the call for an incoming ship to take back up the bay and then on to their homes on the mainland. They established the base over 80 years ago. The village is private and off limits to the public. As pilots guide ships in and out of the bay day and night, many are sleeping here during the day, and in light of their massive responsibilities, we do not want to disturb their rest. And while it would be nice to be home with their families after every shift, John says the intermittent island life has some obvious advantages.
Well, I think the remoteness is the charm of it. There are many different places that one could pilot throughout the country, throughout the state of Florida, but to be able to have the solitude and the chance to reflect and to spend time either by yourself or with your family, and not have the hustle and bustle and not having the honking of cars going by. Certainly there are some challenges, some inconveniences. Everything that you need out on the island, you have to bring out. And if you're working on a project, you'll remember everything at Home Depot except for that one little piece that you need. You find that you're very creative.
The Tampa Bay pilots, the guide-ons of the shipping so vital to our economic life. Before we cast off for our next stop, a look back at this key to the bay, beginning with the southern battery from which the island has been receding for so many years. If anything good can be said about this, it's become a popular snorkeling spot.
Here goes. Look. Hand me the housing, Nick. Got it. Thank you.
Turbulence from wind and waves the day I visited made for poor visibility underwater, but the seas washing over the surface of this once mighty structure gave grim testimony to the future fate of the entire island. As it is, maintenance dredging of the ship channel has only provided enough sand to fortify the northernmost part of the island. The southern two-thirds of Egmont Key has received no such help and continues to be washed away with another line of palm trees giving way almost every day. But what if there were another way to get the job done?
Mighty beautiful beach, isn't it? Not bad for man-made. Unfortunately, we have to keep making these beaches over and over again because nature erodes them away. Wouldn't it be wonderful if somebody developed a system that would cause beaches to renourish themselves automatically and then keep them that way in perpetuity? Well, I've learned about such a system. It's something that, if we used it here and elsewhere around the country, could save taxpayers millions and millions of dollars.
Oceanfront or lakefront, the erosion system marches on.
This is how I learned about the system when I was alerted to a report that had aired on CNN. It was about a new type of technology that had been employed along a shoreline in Michigan and was invented by Bay Area resident Dick Holmberg. He began studying the problem of coastal erosion as a young man while working as a commercial diver. Underwater, he observed the effects of currents firsthand, and over time his understanding grew. He recognized that beach erosion occurs when a current encounters a shoreline with enough energy to lift and carry the sand away. Where harbors and dredged channels exist, the problem is worsened, for here gravity is at work. Sand literally falls into the deeper spaces to be carried out to sea with the tide. Furthermore, associated jetties and other structures obstruct the flow of sand along the coastline. Little can be done about this phenomenon, as harbors and channels are essential to commerce. But Holmberg found he could diminish it while completely reversing erosion elsewhere along the shore. He devised a system that simply slows down the current. It can best be described as underwater speed bumps. Slowed, the current hasn't the energy to pick up sand, and it also drops the sand it's already carrying. The result? The beach builds up. This isn't theory. Where Holmberg has installed his system, it has been proven time and again over a period of time of as much as 30 years. Bob Tate spent almost $30,000 to move his home back 150 feet from his eroding bluff overlooking Lake Michigan.
I moved here 27 years ago, and at the time my house was right where you see the stoop there for going out.
It was after that expenditure that he found out about Dick Holmberg's system and had it installed.
Take a look and see the beach I've got down there now that I didn't have and never thought I would have again. And my kids and my grandkids are enjoying that, and I'm tickled to death.
One of the most recent installations of the Holmberg system is on the Gulf in Saudi Arabia. The entire beach of a coastal town just above an Aramco oil refinery had been lost to erosion, and the refinery itself was being threatened. Work began in the fall of 1999 and was completed in 3 months. Today, residents have a broad, beautiful beach And needless to say, Dick Holmberg is pleased.
And it's quite amazing to watch a process come back and bring soil back in that faster period.
They were satisfied with what it had done and the fact that it was preventing further erosion.
And biologist John Riccardi lives in Tampa, but was working for the Aramco community at the time and saw the system's success.
We took away the big rock boulders that were there because they were no longer needed. The sand had been restored along the beach. In most of the areas, you couldn't even see where these cement structures had been put on the bottom of the water or shoreline because they'd been covered with sand. And basically, we recovered our beach.
Our next port of call, our nation's newest lighthouse. It's much more than a beacon for navigation. Tampa Bay. It's a beautiful body of water, and for some that is enough. To others, it is that and more. For many, the bay's bounty is the source of their livelihoods. And there are those for whom the bay's surface is a major artery of commerce, and so they have built their businesses on its banks. Businesses around which major cities and suburbs have grown. But before it was any of these things to we of the human race, Tampa Bay was a birthplace. Above all, Tampa Bay is a giant aquatic cradle of life for all manner of creatures. Millions of species from insects to mammals that live out their lives in and around the bay. So important is the bay to the Gulf Coast's ecology that it has been designated a national estuary to be restored, preserved, and protected. In the forefront of that effort for the past 15 years is a private non-profit organization called Tampa Bay Watch. What began as the idea of a few has now grown to encompass thousands of people, with a fabulous waterfront facility dedicated to restoration and education. And yes, it is a lighthouse. Its beacon is not as bright as the Egmont Key light, but its influence sweeps all the way across the bay and up and down our coast.
We have the wonderful opportunity to look around Tampa Bay and see what the problems are, and then organize the community to come and help us take a part in restoring the bay.
Peter Clark is the founder and director of Tampa Bay Watch. I've been covering the organization, which, since its inception, has not only had a profoundly positive impact on the bay itself, but also the people who surround it.
We're truly blessed with the community that surrounds Tampa Bay. There are a number of groups and individuals every year that want to participate in these projects, but don't necessarily know what to do. And Tampa Bay Watch helps to provide that organizational framework to get the community involved with these restoration programs. And we organize about 10,000 volunteers each year to take part in these projects.
10,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's no shortage.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
On my most recent visit, a weekday morning, Baywatch volunteers were finishing up the fabrication of some very strange structures. They didn't look very green to me, but environmental scientist Chris Sutton says you won't believe what they can do for the bay.
Today we're building oyster domes. These are also known as reef balls. They're designed to actually promote oyster growth in Tampa Bay, basically put a hard bottom habitat back in the bay, which is made out of marine-friendly concrete to promote the growth of oysters. One fully matured oyster in Tampa Bay can filter up to 10 gallons of water per hour. So the more oysters we have in the bay, the cleaner our bay will be.
Oh boy, good news for us oyster eaters. Well, not quite yet.
They will not be harvestable. You can't harvest oysters in Tampa Bay. But hopefully when we do get our water quality back up to where we would like it, possibly we could harvest the oysters in Tampa Bay. But as of now, you cannot harvest shellfish in Tampa Bay.
While most of the Baywatch projects are devoted to getting our marine life thriving again, one is devoted to keeping marine life from unnecessarily dying. They die slowly in nets and traps that have been lost or abandoned. Though they are no longer tended by fishermen, they keep fishing. And they keep killing. This is a net we discovered off Egmont Key, fouled in some old submerged pilings. The fishermen had apparently been unable to free it, and so they cut it away. After who knows how long, volunteers finally came along and cut it up so that it could kill no more. How many nets and traps like this lie abandoned on the bottom?
Here's a couple of traps right here below us. I'm going to make a hard left turn. There's one down there, you see it? We see traps up here, particularly at low tide. You count them in the hundreds. That are
Eagle 8 pilot reporter Judd Chapin knew just where to take Peter for a survey to locate abandoned traps.
When we pull some of these abandoned traps, we'll get 3, 5, 10 fish, crabs, shells, and other wildlife in the traps just in that one time when we pull them out. So you can imagine if the trap's been in the water 3, 5, or more years.
Being low tide, the traps were in the shallows, just scratching the surface of the problem. That we can deal with. But far more nets and traps continue to serve their fatal function in the depths unseen. Here, a trap next to a wreck filled with dead and dying fish and crabs, and all around it, the bottom blanketed with the bones of its previous victims. Rarely can anything be done about this, but where they can be located and are accessible, Baywatch goes after them to put an end to their useless killing spree. On this occasion, volunteers from the West Coast Airboat Club and various environmental groups joined Baywatch for a crab trap cleanup. The airboats worked the shallows, and then Peter, on his Baywatch skiff, shuttled the old crab traps to shore. There's no telling how much marine life will be saved by such efforts, but Jessica Kolch of the Ocean Conservancy spoke for everybody.
Accidentally lost, and it makes us feel great that we can actually do something about it. You know, not just complain about the situation, but address it.
This is one of the latest programs Baywatch is developing to better our bay, and Peter's hoping for help from the state so that it may be done on a much broader scale.
There's an effort underway by the state to close off different parts of the bay, so all the crabbers need to move their traps out of there. And when we do that, we can have a wide variety of volunteers go in and remove all of these traps at the same time and be assured that the traps that are there are not being fished.
Ask us what is a good plant to pull, and we'll show you, and then you'll get the hang of it, and it does go real fast. You'll pull a couple hundred in no time. Okay? Any questions? Let's get dirty. All right, let's do it. All right. Yay!
Perhaps none of the Baywatch projects is more visible or involves more people than the replanting of seagrass all around the bay. Seagrass is the essential liner of our aquatic nursery, and Tampa Bay has lost almost half its seagrass beds to development and pollution over the years. Students from schools throughout the region provide much of the manpower. Here they are harvesting young grasses from a growing area slightly inland, which are then transported and replanted in a newly prepared location on the shores of the bay.
This area right here was a series of shell borrow pits and agricultural fields. They were purchased by the county strictly for restoration. The Water Management District was able to come in and carve out these large tidal ponds and connect them up with Tampa Bay so that we can come in and plant the salt marsh grass that's so critical for fish and wildlife out in the Tampa Bay system.
Tampa Bay Watch, a shining light on Tampa Bay so that it may shine brighter every day. Our final episode from 8 Country coming up. Now, you might be wondering what a region like this could possibly have to do with stories from 8 Country. Well, I haven't been in the business as long as I have without developing some kind of a nose for news, and that's what this story is about. No, not this nose, this nose. Meet Bonnie the Bloodhound, or should I say Officer Bonnie the Bloodhound. That's her partner, Detective Scott Maxwell of the Pagosa Springs, Colorado Police Department on the right, and Scott's wife, Sherry. They're all about to embark on a tracking training exercise. Being a bloodhound, Bonnie is bred for tracking, but both she and Scott are relatively new to the craft. Sherry often helps out by playing the part of the quarry. Scott gives Bonnie a whiff of Sherry's scent, and off they go.
Find him in. Find him in.
Bloodhounds are considered the ultimate tracking dogs. Their sense of smell is 40 times that of humans. They can distinguish a specific scent from among hundreds and can follow a scent that is as much as 2 weeks old. Bloodhounds may look sad, but they make their owners very happy, for they are wonderfully loving and gentle animals. But I was surprised to learn that Bonnie is a rare breed out here. There are only 3 law enforcement agencies in all of Colorado that have a bloodhound.
do a lot. You know, back east and in the south, they know about them, and a lot of departments have them back there, and they get a lot of use out of them. But back here in the west, they tend to lean more towards a multi-purpose dog, you know, German Shepherds and that type of things.
And how did the Pagosa Springs Police Department come by Bonnie?
I think actually it was my idea.
Mythbusters.
Yeah, we saw a bloodhound on Mythbusters, and I said, wouldn't it be great to have a dog like this here, especially with all this area and the potential for people to get lost here. And that's kind of what got the ball rolling.
Sherry did an internet search and could barely believe what she found. A nonprofit organization that provides trained bloodhounds for free to any qualified law enforcement agency. And 2 weeks of training for the dog's future human partner is included. And where is this altruistic canine academy? Well, you'll find it on the internet at deputydogs.org. But geographically, that's the connection to our stories from 8 Country. Bonnie came from one of the finest bloodhound breeding and training facilities in the world, and it's in Homosassa, Florida. This is the compound of Canine 832. 832 was the badge number of Cody Snodgrass, a young canine officer with the Lake County, Florida Sheriff's Office, who was killed in a car accident in 2001. Cody's love for dogs and bloodhounds in particular came from his folks, Duke and Angie Snodgrass, who were professional breeders of bloodhounds. When Cody was killed, they used his life insurance money to launch Canine 832 in his memory.
Well, as anybody that's lost a child can tell you, that it's such a traumatic. I was beside myself, and my wife come to me. She said, "You know what he dearly loved and what he wanted to do," and she said, "Let's take his $50,000 policy and do it." So we thought we would give away a dog, maybe 2, and right now I think we got 82 or 83 out.
And what does that translate to in lost people found and lives saved?
We have brought home over 200 in the last 6 to 7 years. And actual life-saving finds, I would say, to be conservative, it's 30 to 40. We started out saying if we could just save one life in his name and his honor, what a great thing it would be. And we've been told this by a lot of these officers. It's not spiritually. They said, you know, it's just kind of like there's a hand guiding us down there at night when they find that baby, and all of a sudden there it is, you know.
It's the love of the dog. I've had the opportunity to have a lot of successful finds, criminal and lost people, children specifically, and I'm nearing retirement. I'm going to continue to assist 832 in accomplishing our goal, and that's to bring lost children home.
Sergeant Timothy McGuire is soon to retire from his career in law enforcement, much of which has been spent as a bloodhound handler and tracker. He likes catching bad guys.
Finding the bad guy is very rewarding, and it's a sense of accomplishment, but finding a child and putting the child back home with the family, there's no comparison whatsoever. Absolutely no comparison.
Back in Colorado, Sherry, having laid a 1-mile scent trail, is holed up in a chilly hiding place, waiting for the inevitable, Bonnie and Scott to find her.
Good girl. Good girl. Good girl.
Before Sherry can pull Bonnie's reward of beef jerky out of her pocket, Bonnie spots the scent of another quarry. Most assuredly, a less pleasant scent.
No. Don't find the cameraman. Hey, I got my jerky. How about that?
It's training like this that will make Bonnie and Scott the life-saving team that is so often and critically needed in communities throughout our country. Because the loss of one young deputy inspired his loving family to make the ultimate tracking dogs available for free to agencies that might not otherwise be able to afford them. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of lives will be saved in years to come.
Good girl, good girl.
By the way, a young bloodhound with Bonnie's breeding and training customarily sells for around $15,000. But thanks to 832 Canine's Deputy Dog Program and contributions from people like you, the only cost to law enforcement for the 2 weeks of training of the dog handler is travel, room, and board. If you'd like to know anything more about any of our stories, please go to tbo.com, keyword 8 Country. Till our next edition, I'm Bob Hite wishing you smooth sailing.